1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden to discuss this year's Stanley Cup Finals. The Tampa Bay Lightning finished off the Montreal Canadiens in 5 games to clinch back-to-back Stanley Cups, this time on home ice. The only 2 players who weren't on last year's Cup-winning squad connected for the lone goal in Tampa's 1-0 win as David Savard set up Ross Colton's game winner and Conn Smythe winner Andrei Vasilevskiy held on for his NHL record 5th consecutive series-ending shutout. Absolutely incredible performance by him. The players seem to revel in this one a bit more than they did last season, not only because they won it in front of that home crowd with their friends and family in attendance, but also because John Cooper and many of the players actually acknowledged this team will likely look very different next year thanks to some salary cap constraints and the upcoming expansion draft. Now, we'll get to that a little bit later, but Steele, first off, what were your takeaways from this series?
Yeah, I think it was just how dominant the Tampa Bay Lightning are. And I think that I don't know what I was thinking in our last episode picking Montreal in 6. I think I was just not really looking forward to seeing another team go back-to-back. You know, it would have been nice to see a Canadian team finally bring the Stanley Cup back to Canada. But it's just how dominant they are and just how Vasilevskiy is, without a doubt, the best goalie in the NHL. And there should be no question, no debate on who the best. It's Vasilevskiy. And for me, it's just how dominant they were again. Vasilevskiy obviously winning the Conn Smythe Trophy. Victor Hedman being the best defenseman in the NHL. Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos being able to play the entire playoff season this time around. Only playing 1 or 2 games last year. So I think it was a lot better for him, a lot sweeter winning the Stanley Cup because he was actually able to play. But just the way they dominate on the ice, it just looked like Montreal could not get anything going for them, and showed a lot in the first period. They were getting out in the first period with 3, 4, 5 shots on goal, which is just not enough. And we saw that last year with the Dallas Stars. They weren't getting a lot of shots on net. Same thing with the Montreal Canadiens. They were just shut down defensively all around in every single game this series against the Montreal Canadiens. So it's just the way they play the game, the talent they have on the team. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
I mean, that big 3 on Tampa's blue line, amazing. So good. Any of those guys could probably be the best defenseman on a lot of teams in the league. But I think you said it right there. First of all, that advantage that Montreal had in net in the first 3 rounds, they no longer had it in the finals. I mean, Carey Price, he said he didn't play as well as he liked. I could see some goals he would have liked to get back. But it was just Tampa's offense was so overwhelming. And they say, the best defense is a good offense. That was clearly the case in this series. Tampa just controlled the puck so often. And then when there were those times that Montreal kind of seemed to get that momentum and went on the attack, Vasilevskiy was there to shut the door. They only trailed in 1 game, actually, in that entire series, which is kind of the blueprint that Montreal had through the first 3 rounds after that 5th game against Toronto in the first round. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's just Tampa was so dominant, so deep, and I do think it was a little misleading, that 4-1 series win. I think Montreal probably could have won 2 games in that one, but like you said, Tampa just too good. This team, though, is going to look a lot different next season. They're going to have some salary cap constraints. Of course, Seattle's going to poach some players in the expansion draft. How much of a chance do you give Tampa to run it back for a 3-peat next year? Obviously, they're not going to have that benefit of having somebody like Nikita Kucherov on long-term IR all season.
I think they should be the favorite going into next season. And obviously, I believe the odds have already come out, like way too early picks for who should be leading the Stanley Cup next season. I believe Colorado Avalanche are at plus 600 right now. Tampa Bay Lightning plus 600 or plus 650. So the fact that they're not in first right now with the odds is just kind of just ridiculous to me. Them going back to back, and for me, obviously the team's going to have to change, but without a doubt, when you have guys like Andrei Vasilevskiy, Victor Hedman, all those top guys that we've talked about, it doesn't really matter who they're going to fill in in those spots that they're going to lose this offseason. Obviously, with having to let guys go and then acquiring new guys, and maybe a couple of newbies like Matthew Joseph, when he was in there, did a fantastic job as well in the playoffs. So it doesn't really matter when they have those top guys playing and all healthy. And Nikita Kucherov probably going to be back for the regular season this time around. It's not going to matter whatsoever. So as long as they have those top guys ready to go, they should be the favorites going into next season.
I completely agree. I think they're going to be the best team in the league again next year. Maybe these 2 deep runs could slow them down just a little bit. I mean, you hate to see injuries, especially to guys that talented, but there definitely is a buildup of wear and tear when you make those deep runs. And this team has not only made deep runs the last 2 years, it's been 5 or 6 years now that they've continually went deeper and deeper in the playoffs, aside from, of course, that first round sweep at the hands of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Let's go over to Montreal, who I think they should be applauded for a great run. They have a bright future with some young players they have already contributing on that roster, but GM Marc Bergevin will have some tough decisions to make as far as how long he keeps this veteran core intact, whether he thinks they're built for another deep run right away. Is he going to try to go out and get more veterans like he did with Corey Perry and Eric Stahl this season and kind of go for it right now? Or do you think it'd be smarter for him to take a longer term approach and try to keep the window open for as long as possible in Montreal?
I believe he'll have to take a longer term approach, but still kind of, pick his spots in which players he wants to keep, which players he's going to look for in the offseason. I think the big thing for me is, like you said, and obviously those young guys are ready to go. Just Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki especially, those guys are ready right now. I think Jesper Kotkaniemi still has a little bit of time for more development. He's just too on and off for me at times. But the big thing for me is that first line, Philip Deneau and Brendan Gallagher. I love those guys, but some things are going to have to change. Those guys are supposed to be your gritty, get to it kind of guys for the Montreal Canadiens. It's obviously tough with them not producing at all in this playoff season. So I think they're going to need to make adjustments, put some guys on the top line like Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, those guys, and get some scoring ability from that first line. Because if they were able to produce, it would have been a totally different series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But unfortunately, they weren't able to get anything going really, and I think that's what really let them down in the long term here, with that first line not really producing. So I think Marc Bergevin has to be really careful with what he's doing in the offseason. I don't think he'll have to change too much, but he'll have to change the lineups up for sure, because that first line, as great as they are, they just weren't really doing anything for me.
It's going to be so hard for him to thread that needle, because I agree that the number one priority for him has to be to find more scoring. Like you mentioned, those young guys will probably take another step. I think it's crucial that Kotkaniemi is able to be an everyday player for them, whether that's a third line guy or not. He needs to contribute for them to keep this lineup together and still make it, not even necessarily as far as they did this year, but try to go deep in the playoffs for the next few seasons while Carey Price and Shea Weber are still in their prime. Let's move on to the biggest post-game story, though, which was Nikita Kucherov's shirtless press conference, in which he threw a bit of shade at Marc-Andre Fleury's Vezina and chided Montreal fans for celebrating that lone win in the series in Game 4 as though they had won the cup. People went absolutely ballistic on this guy online. How did you take his comments?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked with a lot of people commenting that it was classless and just uncalled for, but I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Him just trying to get the words out of his mouth, and he couldn't remember the names. He's like that the goalie on Vegas, and a couple years ago, whoever won the Vezina, utter BS. So I thought it was hilarious that he could barely get the words out of his mouth. He's on the podium, drinking a Bud Light, having a great time. He just won the Stanley Cup, so I thought it was absolutely fantastic to kind of get a little bit more of emotion from Nikita Kucherov. Obviously, it's a special time winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. So for me, it was great to see from Nikita Kucherov. I just wish there was a lot more players like that from the Tampa Bay.
Totally agreed. I mean, as a couple guys who have cheered on and followed the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like this year when they blew that 3-1 series lead, like they deserved all of the comments and all of the jokes that came their way. And I don't think Leafs Nation or Leafs fans really even fought back. Like at a certain point, you just have to tip your cap to the other team. If they're better than you and a player is as dominant as Nikita Kucherov was in this series and this entire playoffs, I think he deserves to say whatever he wants. And whether you agree with him or not is kind of besides the point. We want players to show personality. Everybody hates those canned quotes, and we want them to tell us what they really think. So you're not going to agree with what everything every player has to say, and that's kind of the trade-off. If you don't like what he has to say, turn it off. Don't listen to it. You don't have to, you know what I mean? You don't have to fire back at this guy. He's not going to be reading through the comments to see what people are saying about him. He could care less. And I think the league's a better place when there are some heels or some bad guys like Brad Marchand, Tom Wilson, and so on. I mean, Kucherov might take it to that next level since honestly, he might be a top 5 player, and that might be even selling him short on the league's best team. It creates rivalries, and I think it's fun to root against players as a fan, not just for the ones that you like. So I agree. I love to see it too. I don't know if I was a Canadiens fan, I would have necessarily listened to the whole thing. I mean, it probably was like rubbing salt in the wound a little bit, but totally agree. Nice to see that guy's personality finally come out there. That's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steel Roden, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.